Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second predictions video. This time we're going over the LEC. Now, if you missed the ground rules for the LCS one, quite simply put, we're down to 1 to 5 and we're doing mechanics, teamwork and spring split success as our three stats that we're covering on the 1 to 5 scale as stated. Pretty simple. There's not much more I need to cover here. This is going to be interesting with the LEC. And yeah, let's jump straight into this. So let's get into XL eSports. In the top lane we see Cries, Cadril in the jungle, Special in mid, Patrick and Torre in the bot lane. Now XL have made some big changes since Spring Split, bringing in their BTXL mid laner, Special, to the top team. Patrick and Torre have stayed the same, Cadril stayed the same, but they have brought in the Unicorn of Love Sexy Edition, Cries, into their lineup, and honestly this team has strengthened up in my opinion from what it was. I do think that this team could make playoffs this split. Having failed to make it last split in spring, this team does look slightly stronger and I think should do very well here, considering the success BTXL had in the UKLC with Special on it. So let's kick off our mechanical skills. Now we start with Cries being a solid 3, same with Special. Reason being is they've not played on the LEC stage yet, can't really give them that high of a score, and as such they just get the nice solid 3. As for Cadril and Patrick, they get a 4 because they're solid mechanical players. You look at Cadril's ganks and his mechanics on the champs like Lee Sin, Elise, champs that have been quite prevalent in the LEC before the Karthus, Gragas, Elise jungle meta. But with this upcoming split, let's just say champions like Graves, Wukong, champs along those lines, even Lee Sin, are all prevalent junglers in the current meta. They're very, very strong, and you can kind of play this carry style jungle, so these mechanics are going to be quite big if they are to obviously run with them. Now, as for Torre, giving him a 3, he's a support. Mechanics truly aren't too good, but he is very good at the defensive supports like Braum, and he knows where to position correctly and use them effectively. And it got spliced to Worlds because of his actual outgoing playstyle and it being very, very strong. So let's talk about teamwork here. Now, XL as a team, they've made some big changes in the offseason, bringing in 2 players into the core 3's lineup, and you can only give the 2 players that haven't played with this team yet 3s because we don't know how they'll work together and synergize. As for Torre and Patrick, very strong, highly competent teamwork between these players. Torre, as I've said again, his mechanics are not there in terms of what champions like to play, but his teamwork is what he is known for. He plays for the team, he plays positioning well for the team. He's kind of the sacrifice for most of the plays that if XL lose, he kind of gives up his own life so that the rest of the team can escape. Patrick is a strong player. His teamwork goes in at a nice solid scoreline of a 3 because he's just there to sweep up kills and kill things. That's the job of an ADC. But as for Cadril, coming in with another solid 4, he sets up a lot. He's a very, very active jungler. He likes to get around the map, He likes to create plays, and he likes to be just a nuisance to the opposition laners. So the scoring is going in that favour for XL. So let's talk about the spring success of XL eSports. And one thing to note is this team finished just outside of playoffs. They ended on a 4-loss streak, which could have technically been avoided, I guess, and they wish they did because they would have made playoffs. But obviously Rogue finished 9-9, whereas this team went 7-11. So it's kind of hard to give them anything but a 2 here, considering they didn't make playoffs. They're one of the 3 teams that didn't, and them teams were kind of worse than XL in the entirety of the split, and as such they only get a 2. As for Special, he played very well in the European Masters. XL did make it to the quarterfinals after a phenomenal UKLC run where they went undefeated, but obviously this isn't the LEC, the toughest league in Europe, the best league in Europe, so it's kind of hard to give him anything but a 3. Similar with Cries, can't give him much more than the 3 because he didn't play in the LEC. Now let's discuss our runners-up in the spring split. Fnatic in the top lane, we've got Bwipo. Jungle was self-made, Nemesis in mid, Reckless and Hylissang are in the bot lane. Now this team, as stated, did finish second in the spring split and in playoffs behind G2. And you could say that comes down to a little bit of nerves in the best of 5 series, which were quite evident in the actual playstyle of a few players. But this team is very, very strong, and it should be very, very interesting to see how they do in spring. Now we'll move into the mechanics of these players, and what we see is Reckless with a huge 5. I feel this guy is probably the best ADC in the league. Even if G2 are switching and rotating auto-filled bot laners into that role, Reckless has been out and out the best ADC for ages, and he remains there. Self-made Nemesis, very strong players in their own rights mechanically. Obviously they wouldn't be in probably the most known org in Europe and one of the oldest. It's very, very easy to pick these as very, very strong laners. Now moving over to the teamwork stat for these guys, I've gone with 4s and 3s across the board except for Hylissang, who is a god support, probably the best support in the league. As I said, he may have faltered a bit in the final, but he's still definitely the best support in the league. And what we're going to see this split should be a lot of strong play. Similarly with Bwipo and Selfmade setting up for the team, they've got good synergy. This team hasn't changed at all since summer last year, so there's good team cohesion there. It's very, very strong, and they all get high scores. As for the spring split success stat, 4s across the board. Again, they didn't win the split, they finished second, so you can't give them the 5, but they did take games off of G2 in terms of the fact that they stayed in the upper bracket in the playoffs and Mad knocked G2 down to the lower half. But this team is still very, very strong. It's warranting a threat to all teams in the league. You cannot beat this team because they're that strong. guess it's time to cover the reigning champions in the LEC G2 eSports. In the top lane is Wunder, Jankos in the jungle with Caps, now taking his mid lane back from Perks, who's now sat in the bot lane with Mickey. Now, this team are your current LEC champions, winning the spring split after dropping a series to Mad, bouncing back, defeating Mad again, and OG, and then Fnatic in the final to claim the trophy. And this team are very strong. Yes, Perks has gone back to the bot lane because this is a sort of place that G2 are expecting success with this roster, and it should be a very interesting thing to see. Granted, I am recording this after the first game because I'm a bit slow on making this prediction video, lol. But yet, it was a very interesting matchup, and it gives me some clarity on how to describe how this team plays. So guys and girls, expect high mechanical skill rate for all of the G2 players, as let's just say, Caps, Wunder, Jankos and Perks, and even Mickey to an extent, all have these wide ranges of champion pool, and let's just say they're very good at anything they're given. Perks and Caps are probably the gods of the LEC currently, and Caps just can play anything perfectly and is very good positioning wise, because what we're going to see is his score links into his teamwork because he's just everywhere on the map, similarly to the first blood king of the LEC, Jankos, who just is phenomenal in his role. Similarly, you've got Wunder, who in the spring split was whipping out whatever he liked. He whipped out Kallistas in the top lane. He even whipped out a Karma. He's whipped out Janet, for Christ's sake, in that top lane, and Sona as well. Just these random support picks he is phenomenal at, and he plays them with such skill and accuracy. It wins G2 games, and you see these players, some of them don't get the credit they deserve. Others get a lot of credit, and probably most of G2's credit, to say the least, where you see the little nitty bits being covered by the rest of the G2 lineup. Now, speaking of teamwork, let's just say we're going to see pretty much the same stats here. G2, I've given them all 4s or 5s. Reason being, they just work so well as a cohesive unit. Christ, they're switching roles back and forth for 2 splits in a row, and you see the success that this team have brought with both setups. It's very, very interesting to say the least. And you look at the players, you've got Jankos, who's always playing for the team to get them ahead. He's got the highest amount of first blood kill participation. You wonder why he has that? It's because he's setting up lanes, he's ganking early, he's getting them ahead, and giving them the lead that allows them to help others. Similarly to Caps, he has such a high kill participation when he's playing in mid because he's going and roaming. He doesn't like to stick in his lane as much as the other mid laners in the LEC. He's usually going around, being an arsehole, setting up kills for Wunder in the top lane, even Jankos and Perks. All around being a nice guy and really hard to deal with as a whole. Now let's discuss spring success. 5s across the board. They finished top of the leaderboards in the LEC. They won playoffs after conquering the lower bracket. They are still technically MSI World Champions. That's the success of this team, and we probably would have seen something close to similar if MSI happened again. That being said, we would have had probably a close matchup between G2 and C9, and possibly T1 and even FPX, I do believe, are the Chinese representatives that would be there, but it is a very strong G2 lineup, and I don't think they would have won MSI with Caps in the bot lane, but I think the way they're set up now, it's a definite win, and this lineup is phenomenally strong and probably very hard to beat coming into this summer split. So let's talk about a team that just faced G2 in Summer Split. It's going to be the Mad Lions. In the top lane is Owamne. In the jungle is Shadow. Mid lane sees Humanoid returning. And in the bot lane it's Kazi and Kaiser. A very strong lineup that obviously did do quite well in spring in their rookie season in the league. This is a very strong rookie lineup to say the least, with Humanoid obviously being the only non-rookie here, but it's a very strong lineup that has done a lot of work in the spring split, and considering they're technically on the verge of going to Worlds if they do well in summer, this could be a very strong lineup that can bring a lot of eyes onto the LEC. So let's jump into the mechanics, starting with the Owamne's stats here. I've given him a 3. Reason being is he's not a mechanical top laner, he's kind of more just a bullet sponge top laner. He kind of plays for the team, which is why you're going to see quite a high teamwork skill. Shadow and Humanoid, obviously two very predominant mechanical players. Shadow, very good on Lee Sin in terms of the fact that it was one of his most frequently used champions in spring, and he performed phenomenally on it. Same with Humanoid, he's a very strong mechanical player. You've seen him on LeBlancs, you've seen him on Oriana's. Champions like that, he uses his abilities well, he uses them very effectively, and he knows his extent on each of these champions. Similarly with Kazi and his mechanics as a ADC, he's very strong. I'm surprised we haven't seen him get a pentakill yet in the LEC, but you then realise this is his first season in it. And yeah, it's very strong of a player. It should be great. Similarly with Kaiser, he only gets a 3 because he is kind of another bullet sponge for the Mad Lions, but he is the guy that will set up a lot of the plays. So let's discuss teamwork. As you can see, there's a big 5 on Owamne in the top lane. Reason being, he is kind of the guy on Mad who essentially just sacrifices everything. He sacrifices his life for the rest of the game, the rest of the team, to just absolutely outscale and outperform the opposition. It's kind of the Mad Lions technique. Owamne plays tanks or you'll see him maybe pull out a Wukong here and there in this summer split, but he plays these very big bulky boys who kind of just there to soak up damage, be the target of the opposition, to allow Shadow, Humanoid, Kazi, these 3 carries to essentially win Mad Lions the game. Similarly with Shadow and Humanoid, giving them 4s and Kaiser a 4, because Kaiser is another player who sets up in a similar way to Omne, but he's more of the engage heavy carry support laner. And then you have Kazi, Humanoid and Shadow, who are all roughly in similar positions in terms of how they work together. Shadow is the guy that will set up for Kazi, along with Owamne being a frontliner, and then you have Humanoid, who just is a great mid laner, probably one of the most underrated mid laners I think in the league. So it's very interesting to see how this team performs in summer when they're finishing 3rd in the spring split. Now let's tie this into the final stat, which is spring split success. Giving them a 4, all 5 players of Mad. Reason being, they finished 3rd overall in playoffs, and in the regular split they finished 4th. A very strong lineup to say the least, and truly a phenomenal team considering they were underdogs. They were just a rookie lineup with Humanoid coming into spring. In summer, there's quite a lot of expectations on them to perhaps challenge for these 1 in 4 world spots that are available. And obviously with the championship points in the LEC now working on playoff seeding for summer, this team could, if they finish in the top 4, qualify for Worlds. So we join a team that's made a big change in the bot lane. It's Misfits Gaming in the top lane. We've got Dan, Razor, the rookie of the split, Febiven in mid, Kobe in the bot lane returning to the LEC, and Denek as his support. Now this Misfits lineup has a very, very strong set of players on it. Obviously, as stated before, Razor was the MVP or rookie MVP of the split. Then you have Kobe, who's coming over from TSM, who had kind of a iffy split, I guess is the best way to put it, but he is Mr. Consistent and he did consistently perform for TSM, as did Denek, Dan and Febiven for Misfits. Now the lineup did kind of get toasted in the playoffs by Rogue, but this lineup did qualify in 5th and went out in 6th. So we're going to have to discuss the Spring Split success in a minute as we move into mechanics of each of these players. Jumping straight into the mechanical stats, we start with 4s and 3s across the board for this Misfits lineup, as realistically the mechanics of this team aren't as good as the teams that are above them that I have. And honestly, it's a fairly bog standard team. You do have consistency across the board. If you consider Kobe Mr. Consistent in the bot lane, Febiven's Mr. Consistent in the mid, Razor is a standout jungler and does have mechanical skills out the wazoo, hence why he gets a 4, and the rest of the team gets the score they do. Let's discuss the teamwork stat. I've given them all 4s. Reason being, this team has such good team cohesion as a whole. Yes, Kobe is joining the roster and is new to this entire setup, but he's Mr. Consistent, and I'm going to keep repeating Mr. Consistent because the way his playstyle is, he rather would give up quite a lot of himself to allow his other lanes to get ahead. We saw that in NA on TSM. He gave up a lot of kills and first bloods to Broken Blade and Bjergsen, whom he allowed to scale up themselves, giving up a lot of his sort of like kills or participation in kills, and just for farm, just so he stayed relevant by not costing a team a fight. He played safe, he's very good at it, and with Denek by his side, a guy who's very, very good at playing safe and allowing the team to get ahead. This team with Febiven and Razor leading them in the split, I can see him doing very, very nice. And lastly, we've got Spring Split success. This roster as a whole finished 5th and 6th respectively in the regular season and then playoffs. Overall, the team did make playoffs and did lose out to Rogue, which isn't a shock, but the team overachieved in my opinion on where I thought they would finish in spring, as they lost Soaz, their main leader and guide, and brought in Febiven to kind of be their guiding light, and that big change has allowed this roster to actually thrive and do well. And considering Kobe, who did about the same over in NA but got 4th, I do believe, on TSM, or 3rd, it's kind of amazing me to see this roster do well. I think they will have a good summer split. We look at a team that did very well in spring in Origin now. Alphari is in the top lane, Xerxes in the jungle, mid-seas Nukeduck and the bot lane of Upset and Destiny together again. Oh boy, this team, while didn't look impressive on paper, did very well in terms of the fact that they took games off of Fnatic and G2 in best of fives, and they were very close best of fives to say the least. Realistically, they could have had 2 games off of G2, taking it to a fifth game, but obviously they choked a team fight. That being said, this team is very, very strong. They've got standout names in top, mid and bot, and you could call the jungle as well. It's a very strong team, very interesting lineup to break down. So let's go over mechanics. Biggest thing here to note is Upset's getting a 5. This guy in the mid-season cup showed why he is a very mechanical player. The way he controlled the team that he was on, as well as the fact he is phenomenal. He's probably the second best ADC in the LEC, behind Reckless, and then you've got Perks in third. Obviously, it's a big shock to see this lineup this way. You look at the star names here. Alphari is a great mechanical top laner. He can play the likes of Aatrox and just style on fools in fights. Same with Xerxes, he's got good champion pool to obviously style on. And then Destiny is just Destiny, he just mechanically is alright. Now let's discuss teamwork. And you're probably wondering, everyone gets a 4 but Upset. Upset plays sometimes a lot for himself in terms of saving his abilities to keep himself alive, but he doesn't like to support the team in the way he should be. He's obviously an ADC, and realistically he should just clean up a team fight and play in that sort of style. Destiny, Alphari, again, very good laners in terms of the fact that they set up a lot of the plays alongside Xerxes. Alphari is kind of the big flank team fighting carry. He's sort of always been that sort of playstyle, and it's why this OG side with Nukeduck, who is again another strong play for the team carry player, this lineup is done so well. And finally, let's talk spring success. Now you're probably wondering why Origin has a 3 and not a 4. Reason being is they finished in 4th place in playoffs. They kind of fell off towards the end of the split as well. This lineup you would think should do a lot better than what they did and maybe challenge for top 2. However, they finished 4th. That's nothing about it. They didn't beat out G2, which was kind of unlucky that G2 got plopped into the lower bracket and eliminated OG before they got to face Mad, whom they most certainly probably would have beat, but this lineup is very strong. It's a dominant lineup. Granted, they have lost their first game in summer to SK, a team that everyone thought weren't going to be big show players, which we still haven't covered yet. It's interesting to me to see that this lineup has kind of just fallen into place in a space that everyone thinks they're guaranteed top 3. They're a top 3 team. But in spring we saw that they didn't finish top 3 and they might be on the cusp of not making Worlds. But only time will tell as this team progresses through summer. Next up, we've got Rogue. This lineup has not changed since spring, and well, it's still very strong. We've got Finn in the top lane, Inspired in the jungle, Larson in mid, Hansama and Vanda are in the bot lane together. Now, this roster did make playoffs. They finished in 6th in the regular split and then 5th in playoffs, beating out Misfits in the lower bracket first round, and obviously losing out in the next round to Origin, which was kind of a shock to most teams that Rogue would actually make it past Misfits, and it was quite a lackluster matchup. That being said, this roster has a lot to prove here in Summer if they want to make that World's spot in playoffs. Let's jump straight into Rogue's nice little juicy lineup here in terms of the mechanical stats, and what you see across the board is pretty much 4s. The team is very well mechanically gifted in terms of the fact that they play good assassin-y, sort of hard to mechanical champions like Aurelia and the occasional Zeds here and there in the mid lane. This team is very good at obviously controlling the tempo of a match as well as sort of the play style, and sometimes it can be to their detriment. Jumping across to teamwork, big standouts here of Vander and Finn score. Obviously Vander is probably the main kind of captain of this team. He's the old guy of the team. He's very good. He's been in the LCS, EU style and LEC for a long time, and he's very good at his job. He knows how to work his team. He knows how to support, basically, be that guy that keeps his team alive and rolls with it. As for Finn, the reason he's only got a 3, he kind of isolates himself a lot and has got a lot of isolated deaths in spring and summer of last year. He does kind of get focused down. If he's obviously pushed a lot, he kind of gets forced to isolate himself. Kind of like how COVID's made people. Lol. But yeah, he likes to sort of play by his lonesome and kind of gets punished for it, and thus he has a lower teamwork score. Lastly, let's discuss Spring Split success for Rogue. Giving them a 3, they made playoffs, they finished in 5th/6th. Overall, obviously, it's a alright position in terms of coming into Summer. Obviously, you expect a lot of improvement from this lineup coming in and to hopefully challenge for a top 4 place. They're not out of contention, especially with teams around them dropping games already in the first day of the LEC. Who knows how they'll actually perform though, as I feel this team could and possibly do well. Well, we moved to a team that had a pretty rough spring split, to say the least, in Schalke. In the top lane, we see Odawamne returning, Lurox is in the jungle, Abadage in mid, Inax and Nukes are the bot lane duo. Now, as I said, this team struggled in spring, really not picking up that many wins, but they were the first team to beat G2, and one of the only teams to beat them last split. And one thing to note is we see Inax returning, not for Given, who was dropped by the team, and Nukes has been picked up from Big this split only, and it should be an interesting lineup to say the least. So we start with the mechanics, and as you can see, 3s across the board for every single player, and the reason being is I don't feel Schalke are that mechanically gifted in terms of the fact that they're a very just standard team. Losing Upset, who would have probably been their only 4 rated mechanical player, really cost Schalke a lot. Bringing in Inax, who was playing in the lower leagues as a replacement, has done them quite a bit of good, but it's still a very bog standard team that really are a middle of the pack sort of lineup. Now we move over to the teamwork stat, and as you can see, I've given Odawamne and Abadage both 4s. And the reason being is these two have such good synergy together. They've been playing together for quite a while now, and they're very, very good together. You can tell that they played for a long time, and it's got a good team cohesion if these two are working well and are on form. And it's sort of a thing that allows players like Nukes, like Inax, to just thrive in team fights and actually pick up wins. So let's discuss Spring Split success. Now this team did finish outside of playoffs by quite a bit in comparison to XL, but this team did beat G2, so they're still warranting a 2 at least. The only player who doesn't get a 2 is obviously Nukes because he wasn't in the lineup. I was tempted to give Inax a 3 as well because he wasn't actually a player in the team for half the split. And yeah, I just went with the solid 2 though, because he did play the majority of the games towards the end. And yeah, this team really didn't do that much in Spring. Now we jump into our second to last team, SK Gaming. In the top lane we see Genax, in the jungle is Trick, Zazie takes up his new role in the mid lane, with Limit and Crownshot in the bot side map. Now SK really didn't do too well in Spring, and they've obviously made a few changes. Genax is moving up to the top lane, Zazie has been brought in to kind of spruce up the SK mid lane, and after watching them decimate OG, this lineup is looking to be very, very strong considering the few changes that they've made as a whole, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they progress through summer. Let's now discuss the mechanics of SK. Well, in my opinion, this team isn't that mechanically gifted in terms of who they have. Obviously, can't really comment on Zazie on an LEC level yet, but Trick isn't a mechanical jungler, he's more of the teamfight jungler. As for Genax, he's can't really comment on his mechanical skills as a top laner. You can as a mid laner, I'd probably give him a 4, but obviously with the champion pool being slightly different for the top lane in comparison to mid, you kind of can't say the same thing in terms of mechanics. However, Crownshot and Limit, a very strong bot lane duo. Crownshot does get the nice little 4 because it is a very, very fun lane and one that can dominate very nicely for SK Gaming. Jumping into teamwork now, SK, I've given them a fairly even thing. Obviously, as I stated before, Trick is that team fighting jungler who wants to play for the team, so he gets a nice 4. The rest of the team, fairly hard to not give them just average scores here. This team really isn't anything special in terms of team cohesion. You've got Crownshot, Limit and Genax and Trick, all members from Spring, which obviously does improve the team cohesion, hence why it's nothing below a 3. But obviously with the addition of Zazie, this team might improve their cohesion and work a lot better, and with the off season they've had being really long, it might be very good for them that they haven't changed that much of their lineup. And lastly, let's discuss my favourite stat in the world, Spring Split success. Now, SK as a whole didn't do the best. They finished pretty much dead last, or in 9th, which is still pretty bad. This team really did not perform at all. With some of the names on this team, you think they would do quite well. Obviously, it was kind of a bad year, and what could be a bad season as a whole for SK maybe able to be turned around in summer, who knows? But this team realistically didn't do the best in spring at all. So let's talk about our last team in the league, Vitality. In the top lane we have Cabashard, jungle is Nidge, Milika in the mid lane, Comp and Lebrov in the bot side map. Now this team have made some huge changes in the off season, bringing in 3 new players into this roster who has made such a big change drastically, and yeah, I'm amazed that they have done this. Picking up their first win already in summer against the team that was meant to be, I predicted to beat them in Schalke. But yeah, this team have made some big changes and it looks to have worked out so far. That being said, it's only one game, but I'm liking the new look here. And we're going to have to break down the mechanical stats, which, if you can't tell, you're going to see a lot of 3s. Because guess what? I can't really rate 3 of the players because they've not played LEC yet. So the jungler, the mid and the support all get nice 3s. Comp gets a 4. He's very good mechanically. We saw today him on an Ezreal. Worked out quite nicely. He was just poking away for free and it was not a hard game at all. Cabashard, I was tempted to give more. He's kind of this team's leader, and as a whole, he's very, very good at his job in top lane. He's solid, he's consistent, he's just bang average as a top laner, so yeah, this team is very, very nice looking. As for teamwork, again, 3s across the board. This team did meh last split in terms of cohesion, and with the changes here, you can't really rate them too highly as a team with the teamwork skill because they're new to really gelling together. It's not something you expect to come overnight, so you can't really say, oh, they're super duper good in terms of teamwork, they're fluent, they're amazing. No, you can't exactly say that considering so many changes has happened to this roster. So yeah, it's a bang average scoreline for teamwork. Lastly, let's talk spring success. One's for Cabashard and Comp, purely because, guess what? They finished dead last. There's no surprises there that they're going to get a 1. As for the rest of the team, they didn't play in the LEC, so you can't exactly say they didn't do bad, because otherwise they wouldn't have been picked up by an LEC organisation. So yeah, this is going to be a fairly obvious choice and why they're only going to get 1 or 3s. That being said, this roster does look quite good. I'm glad that a roster who kind of had such good success last season in terms of making playoffs and performing well, before coming to this season, where this season they kind of just flopped in the first split, so drastic changes have happened and you can tell that they're looking on the up. It looks a lot better than what it was, and I'm actually interested to see how well this Vitality team performs through the entirety of the year. So ladies and gentlemen, let's end this video right. Let's go over my actual ranking of each team overall, starting with the bottom 4, the teams that don't make it into playoffs: XL, Schalke, Vitality and SK. Reason being, the team lineups as a whole, yes, Vitality has made changes, and so has SK. Schalke, not so much, but they were the stronger of the 3 in spring. XL have made big changes, I feel could contest for that 6th spot against the probably Misfits or Rogue, but these 4 teams honestly were the weakest in spring and did have little bits of a slump in there. Sort of runs, I guess is the best way to put it, But they have made changes, but in my opinion, it's not big enough changes to contest the top 6 teams that I have there. As for 5th and 6th, we've got Rogue, we've got Misfits. Misfits brought in probably a big upgrade in Kobe, and yes, I have just watched the Fnatic Misfits game live. Misfits should have won that, but that's for another video. But it was a very, very interesting choice to bring in Kobe, because before leaving for NA, he was considered probably all-pro bot laner. He was above Reckless, and so this should be a big season for him coming back to Europe and actually performing. As for Rogue, I feel that they're going to get stage fright again in playoffs. Usually Rogue are a team that perform well during the regular split and then slump in playoffs, kind of how I feel it's going to happen. But with the teams that are in 4th, 3rd, 2nd and 1st, the teams that have just been on fire, really. After watching day 1 of the LEC, Origin kind of fell off against SK, which is kind of a worry. Maybe they finish lower down the leaderboard than what I have them at the moment. But I put Origin in 4th. I feel that Mad will beat them in a best of 5 in summer, if it comes to that. And honestly, it doesn't really matter too much, the top 4, in terms of their placings. They all go to Worlds in playoffs, if that's how it finishes. I honestly think this could be a very interesting setup. Now, reason why I have Mad in 3rd. Mad, I honestly think, are the 3rd best team in the league. You could say Origin are, with their star power and their lineup, but I think Mad have proven to people in spring they're not to be messed with. They're a good, solid team. They've got such a good style that, yes, when it's figured out, they just get punished for it. If you look at the run back from the G2 second best of 5, where they absolutely got demolished because G2 figured out how they play. But they're still a strong team that have appear to have adapted over the off-season to make their lineup better, to improve a hell of a lot more, and is really, really strong. As for the reason why Fnatic is in 2nd behind G2, Fnatic realistically had quite a poor spring finals. I'm not saying that the rest of the season was bad. Don't get me wrong, they were probably one of the best teams in the regular season and in playoffs, but the finals, they had what I think is stage fright, considering it was on a online environment instead of the offline in a arena where you've got a crowd who are there cheering you on and you can hear the cheers. You've instead got your own room sat in silence, but all you can hear is your team comms. There's a bit of a difference, and the crowd does make a difference. And you could tell in how some of the players on Fnatic performed. But this summer split, I think it's going to be close. We're most certainly going to get a G2 Fnatic best of 5. That's undeniable. If I'm wrong, I'll buy ice cream and eat it for a video. Why not? I'm going to have to obviously record that, which is not going to be fun. And it would also be a face reveal. There you go. But yeah, G2 in 1st. Why is G2 in 1st? G2 are hands down the best team in the world, probably I'd say right now. In terms of the fact that they've now got Perks playing ADC. Caps is more suited to mid lane, so giving him the mid role is just a lot scarier. And Caps does Caps things is kind of a big thing. And you know what happens when Caps is allowed to play mid. He starts roaming. When he gets roaming, he starts affecting the lanes. When he's affecting the lanes, you can see a Wonder carry game. You could even see a Perks carry game. Or even a Yankos carry game. I Don't think we've ever seen a Mickey carry game, but we're waiting on it because G2 are crazy enough to do it. But yeah, that's going to be it for this predictions video. I know it's took a bit longer than expected, but you kind of have to when you're obviously busy doing other things, i.e. making the LCS predictions. But yeah, that's going to be it. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you guys later. Peace out.